this year at Gold Hill, we're exploring the Old Testament book by book, seeking God's great purpose for the world. All the information can be found at goldhill.org/ggp or by following us on Facebook or Twitter. Today we come to 1 Kings, and the material for this is at goldhill.org/1 Kings. 1 Kings is a continuation of the story in 1 and 2 Samuel, which tells of the establishment of kings ruling in Israel. It maps out who was king and when they reigned, and it talks about the moment Israel became a divided nation, split in two. The moment two men who both felt the throne was rightfully theirs waged war and split the people of Israel into two peoples, Judah in the south and Israel in the north. It talks about the hearts of the kings and gives insight into their spiritual lives, as well as snapshots of their actions. It talks of how the kings led the people away from the ways of the Lord and sinned against him. Last week, Dave challenged us to think about whether we want to keep the same worldly things in our lives, but cover it with a thin layer of God. Or do we want to be a people all about Jesus, so obsessed that everything in our day-to-day lives is entirely focused on him, that we live the way he lived and acted the way he did? 1 and 2 Kings shows us what happens if we only let God be an addition to our lives. It shows us the consequences of not choosing to center everything around him, and those consequences aren't good. As Solomon became older, his gaze was drawn away from God and onto other things, which in turn meant that he drifted away from God's ways and God's plan for Israel, and this had consequences. Throughout this book, there is a phrase which is repeated and repeated. He walked in the ways of his father and did evil in the eyes of the Lord. This is said time and time again about the kings recorded in this book, with only a few who bucked the trend and stayed true to the Lord. If you were to examine your lifestyle and your heart, could you say that you stay true to the Lord and that what you do is with him and for him? Or do you still cling to things you know you shouldn't, but cover it with a layer of God? Do you follow Jesus every day, or just on a Sunday or the evening your life group is on? Throughout the whole book, God is still being faithful to the promises he made, to his covenant. Even though the kings turned away from God, turned towards other gods and idols, even though they weren't faithful, God was faithful. His faithfulness remains. Hidden in 1 Kings is the longing for the promised king to come, the king that will make a new and better covenant, a king who will be so focused on God that his life points to the Father, that everything he does brings glory to God. We'd love for you to join us on Sunday as we seek this king together.